WrestleMania 36 Night 1 is in the books. How'd it go? What's going on out there? It's your boy Tommy on the spot for Watch Along Wrestling, and tonight was the first night of WrestleMania 36. Come on! You knew I wasn't going to let an entire WrestleMania season go by without a single update, did you? Come on now. It is great to be back here with each and every one of you guys. If it's your first time visiting the channel, thanks so much for checking us out. Make sure you smash that subscribe button so you get all those updates rolling into your inbox, to your email, to your socials, and you'll be able to keep it up to date with everything right here on Watch Along Wrestling. And I'm telling you guys, I am pretty stoked right now. It is super late where I'm at, but WrestleMania 36 has just wrapped up its first night, and I thought it was a pretty enjoyable night of entertainment. Now, of course, you had to go in with this with a couple expectations. First of all, if you're watching this show, at this point, you kind of need to shelve all of your thoughts about whether or not they should have gone on with the show. My personal thought on it, probably not, right? Did I think it was a little irresponsible to be out there and doing a WrestleMania when Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NFL, everything else has kind of ceased operations? Yeah, it is pretty irresponsible. And no, I didn't think that maybe it was the most necessary thing to do. But since we're putting all that behind us now, we kind of need to go into this with kind of a tunnel vision. I think Edge said it great on Twitter, where he basically said, hey guys, you know, this could be an escape for some people, so if we're all going to get in on this and we're all going to put all the circumstances behind, the should'ves, the would'ves, the could'ves, if you will, we just need to kind of tackle WrestleMania for what it was, and what it was, I thought, an enjoyable night of wrestling. Now, I will also preface this by saying that if you compare this with the WrestleManias of years past, it's going to be tough to do. Because obviously, when you turn on those WrestleManias, you'll see 70,000, 80,000 fans from all over the world who are really excited to be there, who have been building up this night really for an entire week, in some cases an entire year, and they were just losing their minds, having a hell of a lot of fun. And even though I thought WWE put together a really great effort tonight, of course it's not going to be the same without any fans in attendance. It's just, you can't capture that same atmosphere. You think about some of the old WrestleMania matches. Look at Hulk Hogan versus The Rock. If Hulk Hogan and The Rock had the same match they had at WrestleMania 18 tonight in the Performance Center with no fans and did all their looking arounds and everything, it would not be half the match that it was. The appeal of that match was seeing all of these people in Toronto in the Sky Dome just losing their minds for Hulk Hogan and just being so excited to have this guy come back. So it was a completely different atmosphere in terms of that. Like, you're not going to get the same ambiance with not having a crowd as you would with a crowd. But if you were able now to kind of get into the flow of, I guess, kind of getting used to wrestling without fans, as crazy as that may seem and as crazy as that may sound, then I think if you did that, you kind of could have had a really nice night of wrestling. So let's get into it here. I'm not going to go through the breakdown of every single move for move. There's plenty of recaps out there. There's plenty of places you can go to find that stuff. I'm going to give my thoughts kind of on each match, how it all went down. First things first, one of the things I really noticed is I absolutely loved the idea of this being over 2 nights. Give us 3 hours of wrestling, which is what pay-per-views used to be back in the day. Pay-per-views used to be, I was on the phone chatting with my mother of all people, because everybody kind of realized this was, WrestleMania was going on today, because nothing else is. So WrestleMania was basically all over the place, and so my mother hasn't watched since I was a little kid, and she had no choice to, was like, hey, how was WrestleMania? And I said, you know, it was great, it was only 3 hours, and she said, 3 hours, isn't it always 3 hours? And I said, no, I mean, usually it's about 5-6 hours, and I think when this show ended, and it ended a little after 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and I was sitting there with my brother-in-law, with my wife, and we were talking about how last year, the main event of WrestleMania 35, which was a good match, and it was a match that I thoroughly enjoyed when it was replayed this past week on Raw, I didn't enjoy it at all. And the reason I didn't was because we were about 16 matches in at WrestleMania 35, and the main event didn't even start until after midnight Eastern, and at that point, I couldn't help but just couldn't wait to go out and beat the traffic and get back home, and I was thinking, oh man, it's going to take forever to get back home. So I think this show being 3 hours, even if it was a terribly awful show, and it certainly wasn't, I think that it was okay because it flew by. It was a good pace. I think WWE probably was aware that in an empty arena, they had to make this a shorter show. I think if they went out there and slogged on for 5-6 hours in a completely empty arena, it would have felt like it's really dragging. But they didn't do that, and I thought that it was smart they didn't do it. God bless them, because they still did have time to put on a kickoff show match. Drew Gulak did face Cesaro, and a pretty good match. Cesaro is athletic as hell, as is Gulak. Those guys I don't think could possibly have a bad match. It was a fine match, and got the night off started what I thought was pretty strong, and Cesaro picked up a nice win there over Drew Gulak. And then we jumped right into the show. They did a nice video package for America the Beautiful. I thought it was really interesting. I was wondering how they'd do it. I thought that maybe they'd have Lillian Garcia there, or maybe they'd have somebody doing America the Beautiful via Skype or via a Zoom meeting or anything to that extent. But instead what they ended up doing was that they had a video montage kind of showing bits and pieces and clips from all of the great performances of America the Beautiful through the years, which of course the most iconic Aretha Franklin singing America the Beautiful at WrestleMania 3, that iconic moment where Vince McMahon welcomes you to the show. But then they sliced in, you know, your Little Richard from WrestleMania 10, the Harlem Boys Choir, Boys to Men from WrestleMania 11. You had, you know, Willie Nelson, a lot of those different folks, and some of the more recent ones too. John Legend, who I almost forgot had done a really nice rendition of America the Beautiful, and they did a nice package of that, which, you know, again, as I've always said with WrestleMania, part of that is that nostalgia, so it was great to kind of go back, see all these different pieces, see all these things, and then that led right into, actually, to rewind that, it actually started with Stephanie McMahon welcoming everyone to WrestleMania from a studio and letting everyone know, hey, this is going to be completely different, but we're going to put on a great show for you. We're going to do the best that we possibly can. And away they went. And then they went into that package of America the Beautiful. And then they went into what I can only assume was going to be the package had they put on this show from Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. It was very pirate-based. It was very pirate-centric. I hope this doesn't mean that they won't be returning to Tampa Bay, just because if I'm local there in Tampa Bay and I'm sitting there and I'm all excited for WrestleMania, and I know that the folks in Tampa could have easily gone to the show in Orlando just a couple of years ago in 2017. But hey, I mean, you know, the city of Tampa, it would have been a big deal for them economy-wise, and I'm hoping they get another show, but it did feel like they were still going along with a lot of what you could expect if you were to go in Tampa in terms of the graphics, in terms of the theming, and in terms of that kind of opening video package there, which was you had a Captain Jack Sparrow doing a little deal, at least someone doing a Captain Jack Sparrow impersonation, so it was very pirate-centric. I thought it was fine for what it was. Certainly not one of the packages that you'll remember that'll go down in infamy as that great, my favorite, the WrestleMania 20, where it all begins again, and you've got Vince McMahon at the end of the package with Shane and Shane's firstborn, and he's holding up the baby, and it's just like, oh, like that moment there is like the best opening montage. This was certainly not that, but it's fine for what it was. Immediately got Rob Gronkowski and Mojo Rawley. Mojo Rawley, man, I think Mojo is... I've always been a Mojo guy, but I think that Mojo has kept his gig in WWE for this period of time due to his relationship with Ron Gronkowski, and it is paying off for him. And he was right there with Rob, and every single time that Gronk was on the screen, Mojo was right alongside with him, and they were kind of like the new age hype bros, if you will, and they kind of did their thing in terms of hosting the show. I, for one, don't really think WrestleMania needs a host. I don't think that there's ever been like a great host of WrestleMania. I know The Rock's done it, I know Hulk Hogan's done it, but I haven't loved any of them in the role, so I kind of felt similar with Gronk. It was interesting that he was there because he's a big-time celebrity, so to have him there hosting the show I thought was interesting, but it was also just, it was kind of awkward. So this led us to our opening match of the night, which was the Kabuki Warriors taking on Nikki Cross and Alexa Bliss. I thought the match was really good, honestly. I think all four women busted their ass and did a really good job in the match. Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross did win the tag titles tonight, so they got a big win over the Kabuki Warriors, which felt like a bit of an upset, you know, at least for me. It was great to see Alexa in there. I thought she looked really good in the ring. I feel like recently, in the more recent years, she really hasn't had all that many kind of big matches, so it was good to see her in there. I don't know if she's been battling injuries. I don't know what the story is, but it was great to see her back in there today. I also thought Nikki Cross looked great as well. And at this point, it was also, by the way, Michael Cole. A lot of folks said he was going to do WrestleMania alone. That was not the case. He was joined by JBL, the guy who was supposed to be going into the Hall of Fame this year and probably will be whenever they decide to do that. I'm assuming around SummerSlam time. So JBL was there helping out Michael Cole, and good to see JBL and Cole. It's like they hadn't missed a beat. I thought they did a fine job on commentary. Next up, you had Elias take on King Corbin. This was odd from a perspective of they built up such a big deal that Elias really wasn't going to be there due to his attack last week. And at the end of the day, he was just there. So they kind of built it up that maybe he was going to forfeit, maybe he'd have a replacement. I started going through a couple names in my head of like, oh, maybe this will be an opportunity to get Jeff Hardy on the show. I wasn't too sure where they were going with it. What they ended up doing was they just had a match, and it was a pretty good match. Honestly, I thought it was probably Elias's, first. By the way, I was surprised it was his first WrestleMania match, but I thought Elias looked pretty good in there, and I thought him and Corbin had a pretty good match. Corbin ends up getting the loss here. Big win for Elias, which I was surprised by, because it does always feel like they're pushing Corbin more so than Elias. I mean, the guy just retired Kurt Angle last year, but a big win for Elias. I thought a good win for Elias, and I think that he looked good doing it. It was probably the first time that I could actually remember hearing his music. Like, I knew he had new music, but I didn't realize he was like singing in the music and everything. So that was cool to kind of have him in there. And again, big win for him over Corbin. And again, he doesn't do the end of days. I do love that no one's really kicked out of that end of days, and he's protected that finisher. So he didn't. It's not like he hit the finisher on Elias and Elias kicked out. That wasn't the deal there. And instead, Elias just got the win, and I thought a really big win for him, but I thought the guys worked really hard and had a pretty decent match. I didn't have much high hopes for it, so I thought it was a pleasant surprise. Next up, honestly, most disappointing match of the night for me. I don't think this was the worst match of the night. I'll get to that in a little bit. But I thought it was most disappointing because I had such high hopes for it. Honestly, I thought Becky Lynch and Shayna was going to be the main event of the show, and instead it was on third, and it didn't really leave too much to be desired. I thought the match itself was decent enough, but instead Becky gets a win again, kind of a quick win, similarly to the win that she had last year over Ronda. However, so I get the idea that like they're trying to protect Shayna and maybe give Shayna that big win in front of fans at a later time. At least that's what I'm thinking. I hope it's not that they've just given up on Shayna, because I think Shayna has a ton to offer. But this is the second time now. First one being the Royal Rumble, where Shayna enters at number 30 and clears house, but inevitably doesn't win. And now here she goes up against Becky Lynch. It looks like, hey, this would be Shayna's time to really be able to kind of ascend to that level, really stamp her place on the WWE, I guess, for lack of a better term, main roster. I guess on the Raw side of things, rather. And instead, she just loses in really kind of her second big task. I know she went through the Elimination Chamber, but in her first big task there against Becky Lynch, she loses. And on this stage, for her to come out and lose, I don't know. I hope that it's not the end of Shayna's run. Hopefully she'll be able to come back and get that title from Becky again. It was kind of a fluky win for Becky Lynch, and it was something that it felt pretty flat. And at this point, I was feeling pretty sad, because I was like, they're going to end this show with Braun Strowman and Bill Goldberg, which I thought had absolutely no chance to be a good match. And I was very concerned that that was going to be the match that was the main event, but it was not. And we will get into that in a bit. Next up on the show, now the show really picked up. I think the show at this point was feeling a little, the tag match was pretty good. But, Corbin and Elias did as best they can. It started to drag a little bit. It started to become pretty obvious that there weren't any fans there, I thought. And I thought it needed something to really pick it up. And I thought they did that with Daniel Bryan and Sami Zayn. First off, I think these guys, if they wanted to, I know these guys can go out there and have an absolute classic. This wasn't an absolute classic, but it was a fun match. And it seems like WWE is actually really getting behind Sami Zayn, and his character is kind of being this kind of maniacal chicken shit heel who is backed up by Shinsuke Nakamura and Cesaro. So because he knows he has backup, he can just get away with it. So he got the win over Daniel Bryan. So this guy right now has gotten wins over both Daniel Bryan and Braun Strowman, who is the brand new Universal Champion. So Sami Zayn can come out and claim now that he's defeated the champion, and he's defeated now a former champion in Daniel Bryan. I was very surprised to see Sami get the win here. I thought for sure Bryan was going to get the win and be able to get that Intercontinental Championship run that he wanted back in the day, back in 2015 when he won the title at WrestleMania 31. But that didn't happen, and I was kind of, part of me was really excited to see Daniel Bryan get that run, because at the time, remember, in 2015, when Daniel Bryan won the Intercontinental title, his hope was to have that title, bring it over, and only defend it on SmackDown, which at the time was kind of the big-time B show. They weren't doing much of anything with SmackDown. So that was his hope with the Intercontinental title in 2015, and so I was interested to see if what he'd do if he got the opportunity to kind of bring the wrestling prestige back to the Intercontinental Championship. But it wasn't to be. Instead, Sami Zayn won the retained the title, and it seems like WWE's getting behind Sami a bit, which is great, because it felt like for a while they were getting behind him as more of that managerial type role, and now here he is. He's your Intercontinental Champion. He retained the belt, and good for Sami, but I thought this match was really good. I thought it was really enjoyable, and this is where, again, the show kind of picks up, because it led right to the ladder match between John Morrison, Jimmy Uso, and Kofi Kingston. The story that's going around is that The Miz was sick when they originally arrived at the arena, and so because of that, he had to be pulled, and they just decided to send Big E and Jey Uso, rather, either home or stay in the back or something. They were taken out of the match as well, and it was just brought into a triple threat match. And a lot of people were very upset about this and a little kind of up in arms about it, but for me, I knew this was going to be great. You got Kofi Kingston and John Morrison, who are like awesome when it comes to ladder matches and having these big type matches. And now you have Jimmy Uso, who I've always seen a lot in. It seems like WWE sees him blatantly as a tag guy in terms of like even when Jey Uso was injured back in 2015, I think it was, they just took Jimmy Uso off television entirely until Jey Uso was ready to kind of come back, and then they were able to pick up the Usos. So it was interesting to see a triple threat ladder match specifically for the tag titles. Thought the ending here was really lame. I didn't see the point of it. I think he could have just had John Morrison win the match, take the belts down, and that was it. Instead, they did a deal where all three guys kind of took this. The belts were on like a hook or something. The guys all took it. They did like a tug-of-war for it, and then they shoved Morrison back. When they did, Morrison grabbed the belts, and so he ends up keeping the belts from Morrison and Miz. I'm just thrilled Miz and Morrison still have the belts because I think they've been awesome together. If you guys haven't seen that Miz and Morrison, hey, hey, ho, ho, rap music video, it is now my favorite WrestleMania rap music video, taking over from the 26-year reign that Men on a Mission's WrestleMania 10 rap was. It's a fantastic music video, and I hope that they stay together long enough to the point that I get to go into the arena and chant for Miz and Morrison, because I love them together. I love their act. I'm glad they kept the tag titles. Would have loved to see Morrison and Miz in great singles programs, but we'll get to that at a later time. Those guys can obviously offer a lot in the singles division, but together they've just been gold and a real breath of fresh air on the SmackDown side of things, so I was glad to see them keep the belts. And when I saw that match, I was like, this match is going to be your match of the night. I mean, it was just awesome. It was great. And then you got to Seth Rollins versus Kevin Owens, and it was like these guys were like, you know what? Screw this. We're going to do everything we possibly can to give you a WrestleMania-type match, even though we're in the Performance Center, even though we've got the ceiling fans going on above, and there's no actual fans in this building. These guys brought it. I was so happy to see them bring it. If you guys know the history of Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins, you know that they've been friends for a very long time, so you can tell they probably wanted to go out there and tear it up, and that's exactly what they did. Seth Rollins ends up losing the match to Kevin Owens, which I was very surprised by. But a big win for Kevin Owens. This is the first WrestleMania where Seth Rollins walked away without a victory. He lost a match at WrestleMania 31, but obviously ended up winning a match at WrestleMania 31 during the heist of the century. But awesome match, great ending spot there where Kevin Owens goes up on top of the WrestleMania sign, delivers a big elbow drop off of the WrestleMania sign, and I for sure thought Rollins is moving and Kevin Owens is going crashing through the table, but instead Rollins took it, and it was just like, I was like, God damn, that had to really hurt. No way to kind of brace your impact on that one. It had to legit hurt. It was an awesome bump, and it's one where if you go back and think about your WrestleMania moments on this show, that was probably number one in terms of your WrestleMania moments, and it was an awesome match. So hats off to both guys. They killed it out there, and I thought, like, in-ring wise, this was the best match of the show. It wasn't the most memorable match. That we'll get to. Next up, Braun Strowman and Goldberg. Gosh. I mean, I don't understand the entire point of this run for Bill Goldberg. I get the idea of nostalgia. I do. I do think that Goldberg has a place. I don't have any issue with him honestly being a part of the show. What I have an issue with is that he came out there, defeated The Fiend at Super Showdown, and can only really do one move now. Unless he's in there with Dolph Ziggler, unless he's in there with a small guy, this guy can only do one move. He can only do the spear, which we already have now two guys on the roster in Edge and Roman Reigns who are doing the spear. So I don't understand the idea of Goldberg being in the world title picture. I'm hoping that if he does come back, and I'm sure he will, because I'm sure at some point you're going to get Bill Goldberg and Roman Reigns down the road, but I'm just hoping that this is the end of him in a world title picture. Thankfully, Braun Strowman won. I don't love Braun Strowman. I think they're 3 years too late with Braun Strowman, but at least they were like, hey, let's just go with Strowman, let's see what we have, and let's move forward. Strowman won. The match was legitimately 4 spears. Braun kicked out of all of them, so that's the end of the spear being... the Goldberg spear having any sort of validity or any sort of, really any sort of anything at this point, because he had Braun Strowman kick out of 4 of them. Then Strowman had to 3 power slams, and then he did his running power slam. And I guess his running power slam is completely unstoppable. My brother-in-law was sitting next to me, and he was like, oh, that's it. Noah kicks out of the running power slam. And I was like, he just kicked out of 3 power slams. And he said, yeah, but he said he equated the running power slam to the John Cena... how Cena used to do the F5 off the top, and when he did the F5 off the top, that was it until SummerSlam 2016 when AJ Styles kicked out. A great moment. And I guess that is what, when Strowman puts the running into it, that's the end of the, that power slam means it's over. So, Braun Strowman ends up lucking his way into a world title match. It wasn't even going to be on this show. Just lost to Sami Zayn 4 weeks ago, and is now your Universal Champion. Probably the only thing that I didn't completely hate about Strowman and Goldberg, other than the finish, because at least Strowman's like a guy who's on the main roster, and now we can kind of see where we can go with him as the champion, which should have happened a couple years ago, I think, but hey, it is what it is. Let's see what the guy has. Is that this match was not the main event. When I started realizing they were bringing out Strowman and Goldberg at this point in the show, I was to the moon happy. I was amped up. I was like, hell yes, Taker and Styles is going on last. My guy, AJ Styles, with a WrestleMania main event. This was probably going to be his only chance. And yes, tonight's main event counts. Do not tell me tonight's main event does not count, and that tomorrow's main event is the only main event that counts. These were 2 different shows. Both were available as standalone pay-per-views. I think it counts, and AJ Styles now a WrestleMania main eventer, and I think this is really his only chance to do that, and I think it's well-deserved, and I was just very happy. And I knew that this Boneyard match was going to be something different. I knew that it probably was going to take place at a cemetery, and that it was probably going to be a Buried Alive match without it necessarily being called a Buried Alive match. What I didn't realize that we were going to get was a complete cinematic masterpiece that can only be described as, really, and I'm wearing the shirt here as a little respect for my boy Matt Hardy, this was kind of Final Deletion with a WWE tinge on it, and instead of it being very humorous, it was very, very serious. It was done very well, though, and it was a fight between The Undertaker and AJ Styles in a graveyard with orchestra music playing throughout the entire thing, and it was very much post-produced, and it was like you were watching a very small movie. Starts out, they ended up pulling up a kind of I guess it's a hearse, right? And they wheel out a casket. Casket opens up, and who's there? AJ Styles pops out of the casket. His music hits. That's how he makes his entrance. We all pop huge. My wife's there, the baby, and she popped. I mean, we all popped huge. It was great. This leads now to Undertaker, who's now off-site, and he's flying down the road. You hear the motorcycle revving up, and here he comes. And it wasn't straight American Badass. I didn't feel like it was, at least. This wasn't like Big Red Evil or anything like that. Instead, it was kind of like a American Badass / Phenom kind of hybrid, and he's flying down the road, and he comes out to Metallica, and he's just coming down like a million miles an hour, and it's like, hell yes, here we go. And I thought this was so great. If you did not watch this, now first off, I recognize that a lot of people probably didn't like this. I realize this probably wasn't everyone's cup of tea. If you wanted your classic WrestleMania main event to the vein of Chris Benoit, Triple H, Shawn Michaels from WrestleMania 20, this was not that. This was way different, but this show was way different. This is over 2 nights. There are no fans in attendance, and WWE decided to think outside the box and give you something that was completely and utterly different. And for that, I say kudos to them, because I think that that's exactly what this show needed. This needed a completely different feel. This needed something different. You didn't have any commentary throughout the entire match. This was just Undertaker and AJ Styles having a fight, talking throughout the fight. They each had lines. It felt like it was, you know, I think my brother-in-law joked that Kylo Ren was going to jump out and help The Undertaker at one point. And you would believe it, because that's kind of what this was. You had Gallows and Anderson playing a big role in this. You had the Druids playing a big role in this. You had the use of a tractor, which was awesome. And I hope at some point we get the Elite defining moments set of Undertaker and AJ Styles with tractor. And it ends up where the Undertaker, there's this great moment where Undertaker's about to be buried alive. AJ Styles is in the tractor. He's got all this dirt. It looks like he's about to bury the Undertaker. And who shows up behind him? The Undertaker. And now he looks much more like the dead man Undertaker, and he just destroys AJ. They have this big brawl all around this shed and end up with a bunch of pyro, and they've had every bell and whistle under the sun. But it was a lot of fun, and I thought that it was really good stuff. And now I'm really interested, and I'm intrigued now to see Firefly Funhouse tomorrow, kind of what they're going to do with that match, because you know it's going to be something similar. You know it's kind of going to have some cinematography in there. And I think big kudos goes out to Jeremy Borash. He was very instrumental in those final deletion segments for TNA, and when WWE brought him over, you'd think he would have been able to kind of help out with some of the stuff with Matt Hardy, which he did do once. They did do one where he was with Bray and Matt, but these types of matches now, I think they do have a place, and I think that specifically something like this couldn't happen in a regular WrestleMania. You couldn't have 80,000 people sitting there watching the screen at the end of the show for a main event. But for something that's specifically for the viewing audience, I think it worked out great. So really good stuff. This pumped me up. Like, I was legitimately, this show ended in a little over 3 hours. I think it was legit full 3 hours. I think it's, if you go look on the network, I think it's 2:59:53 actually. So right up to that 3 hour mark, ended exactly at 10 p.m. And this is the type of thing they needed over the first 2 days, because when it was done, I was like, hell yes. Let's get ready for night 2. I'm amped. I turned on the WWE Chronicle on Drew McIntyre, and I watched that. I wanted more wrestling, and I think that is what you want at WrestleMania. You want the show to be so good that you can't wait to turn on Raw the next night. And in this situation, you want the show to be so good to give you something to want to come back for 3 more hours tomorrow night. And that's where I'm at. So that was my thoughts on night 1 of WrestleMania. Let me know what your thoughts were in the comments section below. I, for one, am ready for night 2. I'm pumped for it. I hope you guys are as well. Let me know what match you're looking most forward to. You watch that WWE Chronicle on Drew McIntyre, you'd be hard-pressed not to really want to see this guy go out there and win the title tomorrow, because that is a good piece. So if you're looking for something to watch, check that out. Keep it locked here to Watch Along Wrestling. Sometime tomorrow, I'm going to be putting up my 5-year retrospective on WrestleMania 31. I think you guys will love that. It looks back at my entire trip to WrestleMania 31 5 years ago, which is crazy. That was 5 years ago, and got a couple photos thrown in there. It's a good little piece, so hopefully you guys will enjoy that. It's great to be back with all of you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next video.